Hi everyone, and welcome to this Visual Best Practice webinar, part of the Visual Analytics series. The Visual Analytics seminar will teach you the do and don'ts of great visualization, the theory behind the best practices that we recommend, and how to share and collaborate with your data using Tableau. My name is Marina Tranet, and I'm a solution engineer at Tableau Software. I have been working at Tableau for more than 3 years now and previously worked a lot with Excel and a few BI tools. And I have to admit that I am very grateful to have discovered Tableau 4 years ago. In this session on the science of data visualization, I will explain you how to design compelling and high-performing dashboards. So we will divide this session in two. First, we will cover the scientific underpinning of effective data visualization. It is not so much about Tableau, but really about how our brain works with visualizations. The second part, I will go over some best practices for building effective visualizations, whether they are simple worksheets, dashboards, stories, or infographics. The goal is really to help you to create visualization that people can quickly understand. But before I go into the deep science, I would like to do a warming up exercise. So right in front of you, you can see some data, a lot of numbers. And the exercise here is to count the number of nines. So how many nines can you see in this data? I'm going to give you a few seconds to run through the numbers and count how many nines you can see here. So usually, when we do this activity in a class, we get different responses. And people will find that there are 7 to 12 or more nines in this image. So what I want to show you here is how we can make this exercise easier. See, now it's easier to see where are the nines because our brain can just focus on the color and suddenly it is a lot clearer. But it's not ideal if you have to count them all and it's still a crosstab. So what if you want to know how many nines there are instantly? Here we can immediately see without counting that there are 13 nines. We can visualize the data in order and make it easier for other people to comprehend instantly. And boom, you can immediately see the answer. You can combine speed and accuracy, something that is very valuable in a report. So what I have shown you isn't real data, but it shows you the power of data exploration. And remember, data visualization is all about discovery. Being able to see these views in a matter of moments is the beauty of the science of data visualization and the importance of exploring data. Notice how we can use color, size, position, and length to display the information. So to answer the question, why we visualize data, well, it's because graph can provide us with insights that aren't obvious from statistical analysis. And here is an example. Let's turn now to another facet of how our brains can help or hinder our understanding of data. It is memory limits. So here let's start out looking at this table. And if I ask you whether we gain or lost customer over the 4 years, we can easily answer that because we have a total line. But if I ask you how each of our location compare, well, that's a little bit trickier, isn't it? But if the same data is shown visually with those line graph, we can easily make the comparison. Why is that? Because of our memory limits and because our brain can only remember 6 items at once. around 6 items. We usually work with more than 6 numbers at once. This table had 16 numbers. And here in each line, the line chart has 4 data points, but our brain perceives them as one. And that is the kind of visual chunking that is very helpful. So, of course, there are times for deep thinking, but that is usually slow and inefficient. So, when you were looking at the first table of nines, all in black, you were actually using a lot of your cerebral cortex to count and to add and to memorize the number of nines. But once it was colored in red, you were actually almost instantaneously looking at just the red because our brain and our visual cortex can detect patterns immediately. So if you put data in a form that our visual system can make sense of, you can explore that power. Pre-attentive attributes is what enable our brains to focus and process in milliseconds before we pay attention to anything else. So this is what scientists has discovered about the criteria that makes some visualization quicker to understand. So thanks to the research, we know now that there are just a few of what we call pre-attentive attributes that can create more clarity with your visualization. And there is actually a way to generalize the pre-attentive attributes in order of importance. If we sort a group of these attributes, position would be actually the best across the 4 types, because humans view position as the most important and shape as the least important. So if you're looking at a scatter plot, for example, you'll see the outlier the fastest. This hierarchy makes sense, and imagine how difficult it will be if all the stop signs change to yellow and all the give way signs to red. Even if they are all the same shape, it's the color that we look for first. And then we can also talk about colors and layout. Colors are, like I mentioned earlier, a very powerful and distinctive things to use to visualize data and insights. Tableau comes with a lot of different colors, but using too many bright colors can use sensory overkill. They should be reserved for data that stands out from the rest, and it is recommended to use color that are common in nature. Also, think twice before assigning meaning to data using red, yellow, or green. In North America, for example, we associate green with good and red with bad. But in China, red actually means good fortune. In Tableau, the default color gradient is set to a diverging blue-orange palette because it is better suited for people who are colorblind who cannot differentiate red and green. Using too many colors in your view can confuse our visual systems. As you can see here in this scatter plot, having one color per state is really confusing and we can't distinguish anything because our brain can distinguish about 8 colors or shades of a hue of a color. So what we want to avoid here is what we have come to know as a unicorn puke. In this example on the right, we have to fight against the color to try and decipher the message. It probably never gets that bad, but let's face it, we all go through this stage. It's like a toddler being given a box of crayons on their birthday. But no worries, we actually have a tip for you. So here on the left, we have double encoded our data. The bars have different lengths per country and different color. Here, double double encoding the data can be problematic because there is no real meaning attached to the color. So the colorful bar charts calls our brain to try to understand the meaning of the colors, whereas a neutral color on all the bars, like on the right, would here be a better solution. So there are times where it's okay to double encode things, where there are multiple dimensions, for example. But you need to ask yourself if it's relevant to the analysis. The solution is to always start with gray. The absence of color is, if anything, more powerful. Look at the impact it has on the view on the right. Eva Murray visualized wealth inequality in the United States over time. She has dimmed the color in the back so that you can focus on the forefront. And we can see here that by the year 2010, the top 0.1% of the population have accumulated as much wealth as the rest of the population. So now let's move on to from the theoretical to the practical. Usually in Tableau, you would create a few views that you start putting in the dashboard. So let's take a second to consider the layout. It is important because it facilitates the flows of answers, and part of how that flow is dictated is how we read. We read in the Western world from top to bottom, left to right. And so our eyes will naturally look at the top left and central areas. So you should actually put the most emphasized or the most important information on the top left and in the middle, and make the bottom right less prominent. So therefore, most important visualization on the dashboard should be in that order. A recent study by the Tableau Research and Design have actually found something that is overriding those basic assumptions. They actually found that the most striking pattern we see was the visual attention paid to numbers in a very large font. Dashboard which contains very large number show a concentration of visual attention directly on the big number. Additionally, this attention happened very early in the viewing sequence. So if it's the first time you're viewing something, and if you have a very important number to display, don't hesitate to make it very big and put it on the top. So this image represents these eye tracking studies. We talked before about bar charts. They are our friends in most cases and the best way to quickly see differences. In this pie chart, we can see that if we didn't have the label, it would be hard to tell whether who is beating or losing to competitor B. You might be able to compare pie slice size if they're next to each other, but it will be harder if they're not close by. With a bar chart, even without the labels, we can see how they rank, especially if the bars are sorted. Bar chart can also help you to quickly see that one thing is twice as big as another. So also notice here the subtle shading we use in the bar chart to differentiate us compared to everyone else. It's very effective. With that said, you shouldn't be dogmatic. There are times where pie chart can appeal certain type of user because of their visual appeal. There are also times where bar chart are not the most relevant graph. As you can see in this example on the left, it is hard to see the trend in the bar chart. We're trying to understand what is the evolution of the revenue over a month in 2017. But because of the height and the visual weight of the bar, it distracts from the overall shape of all the data. So in this case, the line chart, as you can see on the right, is much more effective to visualize changes over time. On the other hand, line charts are also effective where time are on the x-axis, but not very useful when it's another kind of dimension. Generally speaking, it would be good to avoid any food name graph like pie chart, donut chart, which are not very effective visual types. Here is another one, the spaghetti chart. The abundance of colored lines make it very difficult to see a particular trend. It's like a spaghetti ball thrown on the floor. So, as an alternative to the spaghetti chart, we can suggest you one solution, for example, which would be easy to implement. The highlighter. You could just drag your dimension to detail and instead of colors, right click and select show highlighter. And now you can easily identify which one belongs to your brand. Apart from these common rules that you have to keep in mind when building visits and dashboard, there are also some other best practices you can use. If you have to plot time, for example, do it on the x-axis. It makes very little sense doing it the other way around. Second, if you want to compare values, you probably should use a bar chart. And that is an evolution theory based tip. Because our brain is trained to see differences in size and level, we are really quick in doing so. The third one on the bottom left, when you are exploring relationships, for example, between two measures and with a lot of points, it would be best to use a scatter plot. And finally, on the bottom right, you can see that the tree map can be used when showing relative proportions. Another great tip would be to use consistent design and formatting. This is an example from our Iron Viz winner, Andy Coggrave. He's kind of a data rock star at Tableau. So this view doesn't overwhelm people. You don't want to randomly mix a horizontal and vertical bar chart. Otherwise, you will send people's eyeball all over the place. But at the same time, you don't want to make every component of the dashboard identical. So it's good to know different variation of line charts, like slope charts and other types. Here, the heat map of time for road fatalities help us to see what stands out. And also, too many of the same V's can create visual exhaustion. So even if Tableau provides diverse color palettes, don't freak out your audience by doing too much with color. The fewer ways you encode your data and the less your audience has to do to understand the dashboard. While it's best to let your V's focus on the numbers, there are subtle and effective ways to use text in dashboard. For example, you can use it in tooltips. Also, you should consider the level of accuracy of your dashboards. Does an executive need to see the revenue down to the penny? Or will 7.16 million as an aggregation surface. Another tip to focus on the data would be to avoid, or at least make it very light, all the grid lines and separator. So you have to go into the formatting and remove them in Tableau. Finally, an often forgotten best practice when you do some dashboarding is to get feedback. Get lots of feedback. If the data is not confidential, you can get feedback on database communities, Twitter, friends, family, or colleagues. If it's work related and confidential, get feedbacks from your colleagues that are allowed to see the data. And even if your reviewer don't know your business, they should still be able to understand what you're trying to convey in the dashboard within 5 seconds. If not, you should probably iterate and try again. And don't take it personally. So at some point, it will be good enough, and then you can publish it. And in Tableau, you don't have to wait for perfection. You can just iterate, make changes later on as well. So I hope that you felt inspired on how to use these tips and brain hacks for your own visuals. I found that there is a very useful website called Tableau Public where you can see the visual vocabulary. So try to use these tips next time. I'll show it to you. So that brings me to the conclusion of the session. We first looked at the science of data visualization and then look at the practical application and best practices. Here there are a few books that we found helpful, and these books go into a lot more detail on how to make your content more understandable and impactful, and there's a lot of example as well. Today's session was really just a quick appetizer. So I would strongly urge you to continue your Tableau education. Virtual classrooms are flexible and can be taken in 2 hours and a half over 5 days. But if you're really new to Tableau, I would suggest you to take our desktop one class first. I hope you found today's session to be helpful. So now I have finished the first half on the science of visualization, and I'll move to sharing and collaboration. Then at